The sole deep space communication array hummed quietly in the pre-dawn darkness. Dr. Kim Tae-ho sat at his workstation, sipping cold coffee and watching data streams flow across multiple screens. As the head of the Xenolinguistics department, he spent most nights analyzing radio signals from deep space, hoping to find patterns that might indicate intelligent life. Most nights brought nothing but cosmic background noise and the occasional burst from a dying star. Tonight felt different. "Dr. Kim, you need to see this," called Park So-jin from her communication station across the room. The young officer's voice carried an urgency that made Tae-ho set down his coffee and hurry over. So-jin pointed at her main display, where a complex waveform pulsed in steady patterns. "I picked this up about 20 minutes ago. It's not natural. There's too much structure, too much repetition. But here's the strange part." She tapped a few keys and the signal split into multiple layers on the screen. "It's encrypted, but not in any way I've seen before. The patterns are completely alien, but they're definitely intentional. Someone or something is trying to communicate." Tae-ho leaned closer, his heart racing. After 15 years of searching for extraterrestrial intelligence, this could be the breakthrough humanity had been waiting for. "Can you determine the origin? Point?" "Already did," So-jin replied, bringing up a star chart. A red dot blinked in a section of space roughly 47 light-years from Earth. "The signal is strong, which means either it's being broadcast with enormous power or," she paused, checking her calculations again, "or whoever sent it is much closer than the origin point suggests." Tae-ho studied the display, his mind racing through possibilities. "You said it's encrypted? Any luck breaking it?" "That's what worries me," So-jin said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I ran it through our best decryption programs. Nothing worked. But when I tried treating it as a mathematical sequence instead of language..." She pulled up another screen showing rows of numbers and symbols. "Look at these patterns. They repeat every few minutes, but each repetition is slightly different. It's like someone is trying the same message over and over, but getting more desperate each time." Tae-ho felt a chill run down his spine. "You think it's a distress call?" "I think it's a distress call that's not meant for us," So-jin replied. "The signal isn't being broadcast in all directions like you'd expect from someone trying to contact unknown civilizations. It's aimed at a specific point in space, about 12 light-years past the origin." Before Tae-ho could respond, the communication array's main alarm started blaring. Red lights flashed throughout the facility as automated systems detected what they had just discovered, an artificial signal of extraterrestrial origin. Within minutes, the quiet research facility transformed into a hub of frantic activity. Technicians rushed between workstations while senior staff members hurried in from their homes. Admiral Lee Dong-woo, the head of Earth Defense Command's Space Communication Division, arrived just as Tae-ho finished his preliminary analysis. "Report," Admiral Lee said simply, still wearing his hastily thrown-on uniform. Tae-ho gestured to the main display. "We've intercepted what appears to be an alien distress signal. The transmission originates from a star system 47 light-years away, but it's directed toward another point in space. Based on the signal strength and directional focus, we believe this is communication between two alien civilizations." Admiral Lee studied the data for several minutes, his expression grave. "You're certain this isn't some kind of test or hoax?" "Absolutely certain," So-jin interjected. "The mathematical complexity and the physics involved in generating this signal are beyond our current technology. Plus, the signal is using quantum entanglement properties we've only theorized about." Have you made any progress decrypting the content? Admiral Lee asked. Tae-ho nodded, pulling up his work from the past hour. Some. The basic structure suggests 3 distinct types of information being transmitted. The first appears to be identification, codes, possibly military call signs. The second contains what look like stellar coordinates and navigation data. He paused, highlighting a section of the decoded transmission. The third type is what concerns me most. These patterns match distress indicators from every emergency protocol we've ever developed. Whoever sent this is in serious trouble. Admiral Lee frowned. But you said the signal isn't directed at Earth. It's not, Tae-ho confirmed. Near as we can tell, they're calling for help from allies approximately 12 light-years beyond their position. But here's the problem. We've been monitoring that region of space for years. If there's an advanced civilization there, they're either not responding or incapable of responding. So Jin brought up a timeline display. The distress calls started about 6 hours ago and have been increasing in frequency and power. Whoever is sending them is getting more desperate. More desperate and more detailed, Tae-ho added. The most recent transmissions include tactical data, force deployments, and what appear to be casualty reports. They're not just asking for help, they're pleading for it. Admiral Lee walked to the main window overlooking the communication array's massive dish network. Dr. Kim, in your professional opinion, how long do you think they have? Tae-ho checked the transmission patterns again. Based on the increasing desperation and the tactical data we've decoded, I'd estimate weeks at most, possibly days. And how long would it take us to reach their position? With our fastest ships and best FTL drives, 4 to 5 months minimum, Tae-ho replied. Admiral, even if we wanted to help, we couldn't possibly arrive in time. Admiral Lee turned back to face the room. What if we could? The question hung in the air as everyone tried to process what the Admiral was suggesting. So-jin was the first to speak. Sir, are you saying we should respond to this signal? I'm saying that somewhere in our galaxy, an intelligent species is crying for help and no one is answering, Admiral Lee replied. Earth has spent centuries wondering if we're alone in the universe. Now we know we're not, and our first contact might be watching an entire civilization die while we debate whether it's our problem. Tae-ho felt his scientific caution warring, with something deeper, a fundamental human instinct to help those in need. Admiral, we don't know anything about these aliens. They could be hostile. This could be some kind of trap. They could be, Admiral Lee agreed. But what if they're not? What if they're just people like us, facing something they can't handle alone? The room fell silent except for the steady hum of computers processing the alien distress calls. Finally, So-jin spoke up. There's something else. I've been analyzing the quantum signatures in the transmission. The technology these aliens are using is definitely more advanced than ours, but not by as much as you'd expect. She brought up a comparison chart. If I had to guess, I'd say they're maybe 50 to 100 years ahead of us technologically, advanced enough to achieve interstellar communication and probably travel, but not so advanced that their technology would seem like magic to us. Meaning? Admiral Lee prompted. Meaning if they're in trouble, it's probably trouble we could understand. Tae-ho said slowly, beginning to grasp the implications. And if we could understand it, we might actually be able to help, Admiral Lee finished. Dr. Kim, I want you and your team to focus entirely on decrypting these transmissions. Every detail, every piece of tactical data, everything they're willing to tell their allies. And then? Tae-ho asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Admiral Lee looked back at the displays, showing the desperate alien signals crossing the void of space, carrying the hopes of a dying civilization to allies who might never come. Then we decide whether humanity answers a call for help that was never meant for us. Admiral Lee Dongwu stood before the emergency session of Earth Defense Command, feeling the weight of humanity's future pressing down on his shoulders. The main conference room buzzed with heated discussions as military leaders, scientists, and government officials debated the most important decision in human history. "The proposal is insane," declared General Park Ji-min, slamming her hand on the conference table. "We're talking about sending our entire space fleet on a rescue mission for aliens we've never met, to fight an enemy we don't understand, in a star system nearly 50 light-years away." Dr. Kim Tae-ho, who had been working non-stop for the past 18 hours, looked exhausted but determined. "General, we've decoded more of their transmissions. The aliens call themselves the Villani, and they're facing something called the Devourers. Based on the tactical data, this enemy doesn't just conquer worlds, they completely strip them of all life and resources. Even more reason not to get involved," argued Secretary Kim Min-kyung from the civilian government. "If this threat is powerful enough to overwhelm a species more advanced than us, what makes us think we can help?" Admiral Lee activated the main display, showing the latest, decoded transmissions, because sometimes being less advanced is an advantage. "The Villani have been fighting this enemy for months using conventional tactics and strategies. Maybe what they need is something completely different." Across the room, Engineer Choi Min-ho raised his hand tentatively. As the youngest person in the room and a civilian contractor, he normally wouldn't dare interrupt such a high-level meeting. "Admiral, if I may?" Lee nodded, grateful for any input that might break the deadlock. Choi stood nervously, clutching a tablet containing his calculations. "I've been running numbers on our FTL capabilities. Everyone's right that our current ships can't make the journey in time using standard drives, but we've been testing experimental quantum tunnel drives that could cut the travel time to 6 weeks. "Experimental being the key word," General Park interrupted. "Those drives have never been tested on anything larger than unmanned probes." "That's true," Choi admitted, "but the basic principle is sound. The main problem has always been power requirements. We'd need to retrofit our ships with fusion reactors powerful enough to maintain the quantum tunnels for extended periods." "Admiral," Lee leaned forward, intrigued, "how long would such modifications take?" "For military vessels, maybe 2 weeks, Choi replied. "But here's the thing. We don't have enough military ships to make a difference. The Villani transmissions indicate they're facing hundreds of enemy vessels. Our entire space navy consists of 12 ships." The room fell silent as the reality of their situation sank in. Earth's space fleet had been designed for exploration and system defense, not interstellar warfare. "What about civilian vessels?" asked Captain Yoon Hai-ri, who commanded Earth's largest research ship, the Sejong. "Cargo haulers, mining ships, research vessels. If we're talking about retrofitting everything anyway, numbers might matter more than original design." General Park shook her head. "Captain, you're talking about sending civilians into a war zone." "I'm talking about volunteers," Hai-ri corrected firmly. "And I'll be the first one to sign up." Admiral Lee studied the captain's determined expression. Yoon Hai-ri had a reputation for taking calculated risks and thinking outside conventional parameters. If anyone could lead such an unconventional mission, it would be her. Engineer Choi. "Assuming we could retrofit civilian vessels with quantum, tunnel drives, and basic defensive systems, how many ships could we deploy?" Choi consulted his tablet, running quick calculations. "If we use everything, cargo ships, research vessels, mining platforms, even some of the larger space stations that could be made mobile, maybe 20 to 30 ships total. Still not enough firepower to fight hundreds of enemy vessels." General Park pointed out. Dr. Tae-ho cleared his throat. "Maybe firepower isn't what they need. The latest Villani transmissions include detailed tactical reports. The Devourers adapt to whatever strategies are used against them. Every conventional tactic. The Vellani tribe becomes ineffective within hours. So what are you suggesting? Secretary Kim asked. I'm suggesting that maybe our lack of advanced military doctrine could be an advantage, Taeho replied. The Devourers have been adapting to centuries of advanced alien warfare. They might not know how to handle ships held together with fusion, tape, and determination. Captain Hayrie stood up, her decision clearly made. Admiral, request permission to begin preparing the Sejong for quantum tunnel drive installation. Captain, you understand this is essentially a suicide mission? General Park asked. Hayrie nodded calmly. Yes, General, but it's also the right thing to do. Somewhere out there, people are dying while sending distress calls that no one is answering. That's not the kind of universe I want to live in. Her words seemed to resonate throughout the room. Admiral Lee could see the shift in attitudes as military officers and civilian officials began to grapple with the moral implications of their decision. There's another factor to consider, Dr. Taeho added quietly. The Vellani aren't just calling for help from their allies. Their most recent transmissions include warnings about the Devourers' expansion patterns. If this enemy isn't stopped, they'll continue spreading throughout the galaxy. Eventually reaching Earth, Secretary Kim finished the thought. Eventually, Taeho confirmed. Maybe in decades, maybe in centuries, but eventually, Engineer Choi spoke up again. There's one more thing. If we're going to do this, we need to start immediately. Every day we delay means the Vellani situation gets worse, and it gives the Devourers more time to adapt to whatever resistance remains. Admiral Lee looked around the room, seeing a mixture of fear, determination, and resignation on the faces of humanity's leaders. The decision they were contemplating would either mark humanity's emergence as a galactic power or result in the destruction of Earth's entire space capability. Vote, he said simply. The electronic voting system activated, and one by one the indicators changed from red to green. It wasn't unanimous. Several military leaders and government officials maintained their opposition, but it was a clear majority. Admiral Lee nodded grimly. Motion carried. Operation Compass is authorized. Captain Yoon, you'll command the fleet. Engineer Choi, I'm putting you in charge of ship modifications. Dr. Kim, I want continuous monitoring of Vellani transmissions and any intelligence you can gather about what we're facing. As the meeting broke up and people rushed to begin the massive undertaking of retrofitting Earth's civilian fleet for interstellar warfare, Captain Hayrie approached Admiral Lee. Sir, do you really think we can make a difference? Admiral Lee looked at the display still showing the desperate alien. Signals crossing the void of space. Captain, 6 months ago, most people in this room believed we were alone in the universe. Today, we're planning to risk everything to save strangers we've never met. I think humans are capable of more than anyone realizes, even if it gets us all killed. Admiral Lee smiled grimly. Especially then. Because if we're going to be the only humans who ever get to meet aliens, I'd rather they remember us as the species that tried to help, not the one that stood by and watched. As alarms began sounding throughout the facility, signaling the beginning of humanity's most ambitious and dangerous undertaking, Admiral Lee couldn't help but wonder if they were making the greatest mistake in human history or taking the first step toward becoming something greater than anyone had imagined. Either way, there was no turning back now. The shipyard orbiting Luna had never seen such frantic activity. What had once been a peaceful construction facility for research vessels now buzzed with the urgent work of converting humanity's civilian fleet into an interstellar rescue armada. Sparks flew from welding torches as teams worked around the clock to install quantum tunnel drives, fusion reactors, and whatever defensive systems they could manage. Captain Yoon Hae-ri floated through the modified cargo bay of her flagship, the Sejong, inspecting the hasty modifications. The research vessel had been transformed into something that barely resembled its original design. Armor plating salvaged from decommissioned satellites covered the hull, while experimental weapons systems jutted out at odd angles. It's not pretty, but it should hold together, said Engineer Choi Min-ho, drifting up beside her with a tablet full of system diagnostics. The quantum tunnel drive is stable, and we've managed to triple the reactor output. Of course, that also means if anything goes wrong, we'll probably vaporize half the fleet. Hayri nodded grimly. How many ships do we have ready? 23 total, Choi replied. 12 converted cargo haulers, 6 research vessels like the Sejong, 3 mining ships, and 2 actual military vessels that Admiral Lee managed to free up. Oh, and the hospital ship Dokdo, though Captain Im Young-soo is still arguing with Medical Command about whether it should come along. It should, Hayri said firmly. If we're heading into a war zone, we'll need medical facilities. Through the observation window, she could see other ships in various stages of modification. The cargo hauler Busan had been fitted with magnetic accelerator cannons designed for asteroid mining. The research vessel Gangnung bristled with sensor, arrays that could hopefully provide early warning of enemy attacks. Each ship represented years of human engineering and the hopes of the 8,000 volunteers who had signed up for what everyone privately called a suicide mission. Dr. Kim Tae-ho's voice crackled over the communication system. Captain Hayri, please report to the communication center. We've intercepted something you need to see. Hayri pushed off from the wall and glided through the ship's corridors to the hastily installed communication array. Tae-ho looked even more exhausted than usual, his eyes red from staring at alien transmissions for days without proper rest. What do you have, Doctor? Tae-ho gestured to his main display, where a new set of decoded transmissions scrolled past. The Villani have been updating their tactical reports. The situation is worse than we thought. They've lost 3 more colony worlds in the past week, and their main fleet has been reduced to less than 40 ships. 40 ships against hundreds of devourers, Hayri mused. No wonder they're desperate. There's more, Tae-ho continued. I've been analyzing the devourer attack patterns based on the Villani reports. These things aren't just random destroyers. They're systematic. They strip a world of all biological matter first, then break down the planet itself for raw materials. It's like they're mining entire solar systems. Before Hayri could respond, the ship's proximity alarms began blaring. On the tactical display, several unknown vessels had just dropped out of FTL near the edge of the solar system. Captain, called Lieutenant Oh Jun-seo from the pilot station. We're receiving a transmission from the unknown vessels. It's using the same quantum entanglement principles as the Villani signals. Put it through, Hayri ordered. The main screen flickered, then resolved into the image of what was obviously an alien being. The creature had blue-gray skin, 4 arms, and large, dark eyes that seemed to hold an ancient sadness. When it spoke, the translation software provided subtitles. Unknown vessels, this is Commander Thekval of the Karathi Federation. We detected your primitive quantum tunneling signatures and came to investigate. By the ancestors, you cannot be planning what your ship configurations suggest. Hayri stepped forward, knowing this first contact moment would be remembered forever. Commander Thekval, this is Captain Yoon Hayri of the human fleet. We are responding to distress signals from the Villani Empire. The alien's expression shifted to what looked like shock, then something resembling pity. Humans, that is what you call yourselves? You must turn back immediately. The Villani are doomed, and any who approach their territory will share their fate. We can't turn back, Hayri replied simply. They asked for help. They asked for help from us. Thekval's voice rose, the translation software struggling with what seemed to be emotional distress. From the Karathi Federation, their ancient allies. We received their calls and we... The alien seemed to struggle with the words. We abandoned them. The devourers cannot be fought. They adapt to everything. They consume everything. Dr. Tae-ho leaned into the communication range. Commander, we've analyzed the tactical data. The devourers adapt to advanced military strategies, but what about primitive ones? Thekval's forearms gestured in what might have been confusion. Primitive strategies, Young species, the devourers have consumed civilizations for millions of years. They have adapted to every possible form of warfare. Every advanced form, Engineer Choi interjected, joining the conversation. But our ships are held together with desperation and spare parts. Our weapons are converted mining equipment. Our tactics... He paused, looking at Captain Hayrie. Well, we're still figuring those out. The alien commander studied the human ships visible on his scanner, and his expression shifted to something that might have been amazement. Your vessels. They appear to be civilian craft modified for combat. This is your military fleet? This is our only fleet, Hayrie admitted. Earth has been spacefaring for less than a century. We have 12 actual military vessels, and the rest are cargo ships with guns welded on. Tekval was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. Why? Why would a young species risk everything for strangers they have never met? Lieutenant Oh Jun-seo, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. Because they called for help, and we heard them. The simple honesty of the statement seemed to affect the alien deeply. The Karathi have been allies of the Villani for 3,000 years, he said slowly. Yet when they faced extinction, we ran. But you heard a call that was not even meant for you, and you answered. Dr. Nam Soo-bin, the xenobiologist who had been studying the Devourer data, joined the group around the communication station. Commander, we could use any information you have about the Devourers, anything that might give us an advantage. Tekval looked at the assembled humans, then at the display showing their makeshift fleet. I will transmit our files, though I fear they will only confirm what you already know. The Devourers cannot be defeated through conventional means. As data began streaming from the Karathi ships, Tekval asked one final question that would haunt everyone who heard it. Young humans, do you truly understand what you are flying toward? The Devourers do not simply kill. They erase civilizations from existence. Soon there will be no trace that the Villani ever existed. Captain Hayrie looked at her crew, then back at the alien commander. Then someone needs to remember them. Someone needs to be there when they make their last stand. And if you die with them, then at least they won't die alone. The Karathi commander ended the transmission without another word, but his ships remained at the edge of the solar system, as if he couldn't bring himself to leave entirely. As Operation Compass prepared for final departure, the contrast was stark. The advanced Karathi vessels, sleek and powerful, watching from a safe distance. The human fleet, patched together and desperate, preparing to charge into almost certain death for people they had never met. Engineer Choi ran one final systems. Check. All ships report ready for quantum tunnel activation. Course plotted for the Villani system. Captain Hayrie took her position on the bridge, looking out at the fleet that represented humanity's greatest gamble. All ships, this is Sejong Actual. Operation Compass is now active. Remember, we're not just representing Earth today, we're representing the idea that civilizations help each other when help is needed. As the quantum tunnels opened and the human fleet disappeared into FTL, Lieutenant Oh Jun-seo couldn't help but wonder if they were heroes or fools. Perhaps, he thought, the universe would judge them to be both. The human fleet dropped out of quantum tunnel space at the edge of the Villani system, and Captain Yoon Hai-ri immediately understood why the Karathi had fled in terror. The inner system was a graveyard, where the Villani transmissions had indicated thriving colony worlds. Now only broken shells of planets remained. Massive geometric ships, the Devourers, moved through the debris like metal vultures, stripping away the last remnants of what had once been living worlds. Dear God, whispered Lieutenant Oh Jun-seo from the pilot station, his voice barely audible over the bridge's tense silence. How many planets were there? Dr. Kim Tae-ho checked the Villani star charts they had decoded. 7 inhabited worlds, plus dozens of mining stations and research outposts. He paused, studying his sensors. I'm reading maybe 20% of the original planetary mass in the inner system. Through the Sejong's main view screen, they could see the Devourers at work. The alien machines were enormous, some as large as Earth's moon, and they moved with terrifying efficiency. Mechanical arms the size of mountain ranges tore chunks of rock and metal from dying planets, feeding the material into processing centers that glowed with hellish light. "Captain," called Commander Jang Bo-Ra from the tactical station, "I'm detecting Volani ships near the fourth planet. Looks like they're making a defensive stand around their homeworld." The tactical display showed the grim situation. Roughly 30 Volani vessels, most showing significant battle damage, had formed a defensive perimeter around a world that was already half consumed. They were vastly outnumbered by the Devourer ships, but they continued to fight with desperate determination. "Open a channel to the Volani fleet," Hayri ordered. The communication system crackled with interference from the massive energy discharges of the ongoing battle. Finally, a voice came through, translated by their systems into heavily accented English. "Unknown vessels, this is Admiral Kethvar of the Volani Defense Force. Identify yourselves immediately or be destroyed. We have no patience for scavengers." Dr. Taeho stepped forward, knowing that first contact protocols meant nothing in a war zone. "Admiral Kethvar, this is Dr. Kim Taeho of the human vessel Sejong. We intercepted your distress transmissions and have come to assist." The communication channel fell silent for several long seconds. When Admiral Kethvar spoke again, his voice carried disbelief and confusion. "Humans? This word is unknown to us. And how did you intercept transmissions meant for the Karathi Federation?" "We're from a planet called Earth, 47 light-years. From here," Hayri interjected, taking control of the conversation. "Our scientists detected your calls for help. The Karathi told us they were abandoning you." Another pause. Then Kethvar's voice returned, heavy with bitter resignation. "Yes, our ancient allies have proven their worth in our darkest hour. But you, humans, you came. Why?" "Because you asked for help," Hayri replied simply. On the tactical display, the Devourer ships had noticed the arrival of the human fleet. Several of the massive vessels were changing course, moving to intercept the newcomers with mechanical precision. "Human captain," Kethvar's voice was urgent now, "you must leave immediately. These machines adapt to any attack we make against them. They have consumed 7 worlds and countless ships. Your small fleet cannot possibly make a difference." Engineer Choi Min-ho, monitoring the approaching Devourers from his station, looked up at Captain Hayri. "The lead Devourer ship is 3 times the size of our entire fleet. Our weapons might not even scratch it." Dr. Nam Subin, who had been analyzing the scanner data since their arrival, suddenly looked up from her xenobiology station. "Captain, I'm seeing something strange about the Devourer movement patterns. They're not random. There's a mathematical precision to everything they do." "Explain," Hayri ordered, while keeping one eye on the tactical situation. "It's like they're following predetermined algorithms," Subin continued. "Every attack, every movement, every adaptation follows logical patterns. They're incredibly advanced, but they're also predictable in a way." Commander Jang Bo-Ra nodded grimly. "Which explains why they adapt so quickly to conventional tactics. They analyze attack patterns and develop countermeasures using pure logic." "But what if we don't use logic?" Lieutenant Oh Jun-seo asked, an idea forming in his mind. "What if we do something completely random and stupid?" Dr. Taeho was monitoring the Volani communications when he suddenly straightened. "Captain, Admiral Kethvar is asking for our tactical capabilities. I think he's starting to believe we might actually try to help." Hayri opened the channel again. "Admiral, we have 23 ships with modified civilian equipment. Our weapons are converted mining tools and our hulls are reinforced with scavenged materials. We have approximately 8,000 personnel, most of whom have never been in combat." The silence that followed was so long that they thought the communication had been cut. Finally, Kethvar's voice returned, and it carried a note of something. That might have been hope. Mining tools? Scavenged materials? Captain, are you saying your fleet is... He paused as if trying to find the right words. Primitive? Extremely primitive, Choi confirmed cheerfully. Half our systems are held together with emergency patches and determination. Dr. Subin looked up from her analysis. Admiral Kethvar, have the Devourers ever faced technology that's significantly less advanced than their own? Less advanced? The Volani Admiral's confusion was evident. The Devourers have consumed civilizations for millions of years. They have adapted to every level of technology, from stone tools to quantum manipulation. But have they adapted to desperate humans with jury-rigged equipment and no common sense? Oh Junseo asked. Before Kethvar could answer, the lead Devourer ship opened fire. Beams of energy that could have melted a mountain struck the space where the human fleet had been moments before. But the human ships weren't there anymore. Instead of maintaining formation like a proper military fleet, the human vessels had scattered in apparently random directions. The cargo hauler Busan was spinning end over end while firing its mining lasers at bizarre angles. The research ship Gangneung was using its gravity manipulators to literally throw asteroids at the Devourers. The hospital ship Dokdo was somehow using its medical scanners to jam Devourer targeting systems. What are they doing? Admiral Kethvar's voice carried amazement and horror in equal measure. Captain Haeri watched her fleet engage the Devourers, with tactics that would have gotten them court-martialed in any proper military. I think we're confusing them, she said, unable to keep a note of pride out of her voice. On the tactical display, something unprecedented was happening. The Devourer ships, which had adapted to every form of warfare the galaxy could throw at them, were hesitating. Their response times were slower. Their formations were less precise. Dr. Subin's xenobiology station lit up with data. Captain, the Devourers are trying to analyze our attack patterns, but they can't find any patterns to analyze. We're not following any known tactical doctrine. Because we don't have any tactical doctrine, Commander Jiang pointed out. Engineer? Choi's voice came over the communication system from the engine room. Captain, I'm reading massive computational activity from the Devourer ships. It looks like they're dedicating enormous processing power to trying to understand what we're doing. Which means they're not dedicating that processing power to fighting us, Haeri realized. Admiral Kethvar's voice cut through their celebration. Humans, whatever you are doing, it is working. But the Devourers will adapt. They always adapt. Then we'll just have to stay one step ahead of them, Haeri replied, opening a fleet-wide channel. All ships, ignore everything you know about proper military tactics. I want random, I want chaotic, I want the Devourers to think we've all lost our minds. As the human fleet continued its bewildering assault on the Devourer forces, Dr. Taeho noticed something on his communication station. Captain, I'm detecting transmissions from the Volani homeworld. They're broadcasting our fight to the entire planet. What are they saying? Taeho listened to the translations for a moment, then smiled. They're saying that the humans have arrived and they fight like madmen who have forgotten to be afraid. Looking out at the impossible battle raging around them, Captain Haeri thought that might be the most accurate description of humanity anyone had ever given. All ships, she broadcast, let's show them what humans do when someone needs help. The Devourers had consumed thousands of civilizations, but they had never encountered anything quite like desperate humans with nothing left to lose. The Battle of Volani Prime had been raging for 6 hours, and Captain Yoon Haeri was beginning to understand why no civilization had ever successfully fought the Devourers. The massive alien machines adapted to every conventional tactic within minutes, turning the battlefield into a constantly shifting puzzle that seemed impossible to solve. But humanity had one advantage that no other species seemed to possess. They were very good at being unpredictable. Busan actual to Sejong, crackled the voice of Captain Park Dae-sung over the communication channel. I'm going to try something incredibly stupid. If it works, I'll let you know. If it doesn't, well, it's been an honor serving with you." Before Hayri could respond, the cargo hauler Busan broke from the loose formation the human fleet was maintaining and accelerated directly toward the largest Devourer ship. Instead of firing its weapons, the Busan was broadcasting Earth music at maximum volume across all frequencies. "Is he surrendering?" asked Lieutenant Oh Jun-seo from the pilot station. "No," replied Dr. Nam Soo-bin, monitoring the alien response from her xenobiology station. "He's confusing them. Look at the Devourer tactical display. They're trying to analyze the music as some kind of weapon. The massive Devourer ship, which had been systematically destroying Volani vessels with mechanical precision, suddenly stopped firing. Its weapon systems swiveled toward the approaching cargo hauler, but instead of shooting, the ship seemed to be listening. "All ships," Captain Park's voice came through the static. "They're trying to decode classical music as a tactical transmission. I repeat, they think Beethoven's Ninth Symphony is some kind of battle plan." Commander Yang Bo-ra looked up from her tactical station. "Captain, the Devourers are redirecting computational resources to analyze the music. Their response times are dropping across the board." "Then let's give them more to think about," Hayri decided. "All ships, open channels, and broadcast everything. Music, poetry, cooking shows, anything that might overload their analysis systems." The human fleet's response was immediate and chaotic. The research vessel Gangneung began broadcasting a documentary about penguin mating habits. The mining ship Jeju transmitted the complete works of Shakespeare. The hospital ship Dokdo, not to be outdone, sent out detailed medical procedures for appendectomy. Admiral Kethvar's voice cut through the cacophony. "Humans, what are you doing? This is not warfare." "Exactly," Hayri replied. "We're not fighting a war. We're having a very loud, very confusing cultural exchange." Dr. Kim Tae-ho, who had been monitoring Devourer communications, suddenly looked up from his station. "Captain, I'm detecting massive computational overload in the Devourer network. They're trying to process terabytes of seemingly random human data." "Seemingly random?" Oh Jun-seo asked. "To them, it is random," explained Dr. Soo-bin. "They're machines, designed to analyze tactical patterns and technological capabilities. They have no framework for understanding art, culture, or emotional expression." As the battle continued, the human fleet's unconventional tactics began to show results. The Devourers, overwhelmed by trying to analyze human culture as potential weapons, were making mistakes. Their formations became sloppy. Their targeting systems suffered delays. Most importantly, they were no longer adapting to the Volani tactics as quickly. "This is Admiral Kethvar to all Volani ships," came the transmission from the alien fleet. "The humans have disrupted Devourer adaptation protocols. All vessels, press the attack while they are confused." The Volani ships, which had been fighting a desperate holding action for months, suddenly found their enemies vulnerable. Energy weapons that had been rendered ineffective by Devourer adaptation were working again. Attack patterns that had been countered hours ago were successful once more. Engineer Choi Min-ho's voice came over the communication system from the engine room. "Captain, I'm reading power fluctuations in the lead Devourer ship. I think their processing overload is affecting their primary systems." "Then let's overload them some more," Hayri decided. "Oh Jun-seo, take us in close. I want to try something even more stupid than broadcasting music." "More stupid than music?" Oh Jun-seo asked, but he was already adjusting their course toward the massive Devourer ship. "Much more stupid," Hayri confirmed. "We're going to ram them." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of engines and the distant sounds of battle. Finally, Commander Jang spoke up. "Captain, that ship is 3 times our size and heavily armored. A ramming attack would be suicide." "Only if we actually ram them," Hayri replied with a grin that was equal parts determined and insane. "Choi, how fast can you overload our fusion reactor?" The engineer's voice came back immediately. If I bypass all safety protocols and redirect the quantum tunnel drive energy, maybe 90 seconds before we either explode or tear a hole in space-time? Perfect. Oh, Junseo, take us in on a ramming course, but be ready to break off at the, last second. As the Sejong accelerated toward the Devourer mothership, broadcasting everything from Earth's cultural database at maximum volume, the alien machine's response was exactly what Hai-Ri had hoped for. Instead of simply destroying the approaching human ship, the Devourer was dedicating enormous computational resources to analyzing the apparent suicide attack. They're trying to figure out if this is some kind of advanced tactic, Dr. Subin reported. Their entire network is focused on understanding why we would sacrifice our command ship. Because they can't conceive of anyone being crazy enough to do it without a reason, Dr. Taeho added. At the last possible moment, Oh Junseo pulled the Sejong into a sharp turn that would have torn apart any ship not held together by desperation and excellent engineering. But instead of breaking off the attack entirely, he brought them alongside the Devourer's hull. Now, Hai-Ri shouted. Engineer Choi released the overloaded reactor energy in a controlled burst that lit up the Devourer's hull like a miniature sun. The explosion wasn't powerful enough to destroy the massive ship, but it was more than enough to overload its sensor arrays and disrupt its communication with the rest of the fleet. All human ships, Hai-Ri broadcast, follow our lead. Get in close and cause as much chaos as possible. What followed was the strangest battle in galactic history. Human ships darted between the massive devourers like angry insects, using mining, lasers to cut holes in hulls, gravity manipulators to throw debris, and medical scanners to jam communication systems. They broadcast Earth's cultural heritage at volumes that registered as weapon signatures. They performed maneuvers that violated every principle of sound military tactics. And somehow, it was working. The Devourers, faced with opponents who refused to follow any logical pattern, began to make critical errors. Ships collided with each other as they tried to target the seemingly random human attacks. Weapon systems overheated as they attempted to lock onto vessels that were spinning, dancing, and broadcasting poetry at the same time. Captain, called pilot Shin A-young from the fighter squadron, the Devourers are starting to withdraw from the inner system. I think we're actually winning. But Dr. Taeho's expression was grim as he monitored the alien communications. Captain, I'm detecting new transmissions from the Devourer network. They're calling for reinforcements. How many reinforcements? Hai-Ri asked, though she suspected she didn't want to know the answer. According to these signals, they're recalling every Devourer ship in this sector of the galaxy. We're looking at potentially hundreds of additional vessels. Admiral Kethvar's voice cut through their celebration. Humans, you have achieved something no species has accomplished in millions of years. You have forced the Devourers to retreat and call for help. But when those reinforcements arrive, not even your unique tactics will be enough. Captain. Hai-Ri looked out at the battlefield, where human and Vellani ships were fighting side by side against an enemy that had consumed countless worlds. Then we'd better figure out how to end this before they get here. Tech specialist Beiwu Jin, who had been analyzing the captured Devourer data, suddenly looked up from his station. Captain, I think I found something. The Devourers aren't just adapting to our tactics. They're trying to understand us. Their entire network is focused on analyzing human behavior. And I think that might be their weakness, Bei said, a slow smile spreading across his face. They're so busy trying to understand why we're doing impossible things that they're forgetting to actually fight us. Looking at her battered but victorious fleet, Captain Hai-Ri realized that humanity had stumbled onto something that might change the course of galactic history. They had discovered that sometimes the best way to win a fight was to be so confusing that your enemy forgot what they were fighting for. The victory celebration aboard the human fleet was short-lived. As the Devourer reinforcements began arriving in massive waves, Captain Yoon Hai-Ri watched her tactical display with growing dread. What had started as an impossible fight against Dozens of enemy ships had become an utterly hopeless battle against hundreds. "Captain," reported Commander Jangbo Ra from the tactical station, "we've lost 7 ships in the last hour. The Busan, Gangneung, and Incheon are heavily damaged and barely maintaining life support." Through the Sejong's view screen, Hai Ri could see the hospital ship Dokdo limping through space, its hull torn open by devourer weapons. Captain Im Young-soo's voice crackled over the communication channel, calm despite the desperate situation. "Sejong Actual, this is Dokdo. We've taken critical damage to our fusion reactor. I'm ordering evacuation of all non-essential personnel to the remaining ships." "Negative, Dokdo," Hairi replied. "We can protect you until repairs are complete." Im Young-soo's laugh was bitter. "Captain, look around. We're all barely holding together. The devourers have adapted to our chaos tactics, and now they're systematically destroying us ship by ship." Dr. Kim Tae-ho looked up from his communication station, his face pale. "Captain, I'm monitoring devourer network traffic. They've analyzed our behavioral patterns and developed countermeasures. They're no longer trying to understand our tactics. They're simply overwhelming us with superior numbers." The truth was unavoidable. The human fleet's greatest advantage, their unpredictability, had been neutralized by sheer mathematical superiority. For every human ship, there were now 10 devourers. For every desperate tactic the humans tried, the machines had 3 responses. "Admiral Kethvar to human fleet," came the transmission from the Villani command ship. "You have fought with honor, beyond anything we could have imagined, but the battle is lost. You must retreat while you still can." Lieutenant Oh Jun-seo, blood trickling from a head wound sustained when a devourer attack had nearly torn the Sejong's bridge apart, looked at his captain. "Ma'am, the Admiral is right. We've done everything we could. Maybe it's time to admit that some fights can't be won." Hairi studied the tactical display, where the combined human and Villani fleets were being systematically destroyed by an enemy that seemed endless. They had saved the Villani homeworld, but only temporarily. The devourers would return in even greater numbers, and next time, there would be no surprise to give the defenders an advantage. Dr. Nam Soo-bin, who had been working frantically at her xenobiology station, suddenly straightened. "Captain, I've been analyzing the devourer network architecture. I think I've found something important." "What kind of something?" Hairi asked, not daring to hope. "The devourers aren't just machines," Soo-bin explained rapidly. "They're more like a collective consciousness made up of billions of individual units. But the interesting part is how they process information. They have to achieve consensus before making major tactical decisions." Engineer Choi Min-ho's voice came from the engine room, where he was trying to keep their damaged systems running. "Consensus among billions of machines? That must take enormous computational resources." "It does," Soo-bin confirmed, "which is why they've been so vulnerable to our chaos tactics. Every time we do something unpredictable, they have to debate it across their entire network." Commander Jang looked up from her station. "But they've adapted to that now. They're not debating anymore. They're just attacking." "Because they've isolated the part of their network that deals with us," Soo-bin continued. "But what if we could force them to integrate that isolated section back into their main consciousness?" Dr. Tae-ho turned from his communication station. "You're talking about some kind of virus, something that would force them to process information they're trying to ignore." "Exactly," Soo-bin said. "But it would have to be delivered directly to their central processing node. Someone would need to get close enough to their mothership to upload it directly." The bridge fell silent as everyone realized what she was suggesting. The Devourer mothership was a massive construct at the center of their fleet, protected by hundreds of smaller vessels and bristling with weapons that could vaporize a city. "That's a suicide mission," Oh Jun-seo said quietly. "Yes," Soo-bin agreed. "It is." Captain Im Young-soo's voice came over the communication channel again. "All ships, this is Dokdo Actual. My reactor is reaching critical failure. I'm implementing emergency evacuation procedures." But instead of evacuating, Im Young-soo did something that would be remembered forever in human history. He locked down the evacuation systems and set course directly for the Devourer mothership. "Doctor, what are you doing?" Haeri demanded. "What I should have done an hour ago," Im Young-soo replied calmly. "Dr. Subin, transmit your virus to my ship. I'm going to deliver it personally." "Captain Im, that reactor will explode before you." "Reach the mothership," Engineer Choi protested. "I know," Im Young-soo said simply. "But maybe the explosion will mask the virus upload just long enough for it to work." As the hospital ship Dokdo accelerated toward the heart of the Devourer fleet, its damaged hull trailing atmosphere and debris, every human and Vellani in the system watched in stunned silence. The Devourers, recognizing the threat, focused their fire on the approaching vessel. But Im Young-soo had spent his entire career saving lives, and he wasn't about to stop now. Using every trick he had learned in 40 years of spaceflight, he dodged and weaved through the enemy fire, his ship falling apart around him but still somehow flying. "Virus uploaded," Dr. Subin reported. "Captain Im has successfully transmitted the data to the Devourer network." The Dokdo struck the mothership's hull at nearly the speed of light, its overloaded reactor exploding in a burst of fusion fire that lit up the entire star system. For a moment, it seemed that Im Young-soo's sacrifice had been in vain. The mothership's shields held, and the massive construct continued coordinating the Devourer fleet. Then something unprecedented happened. The Devourer ships began to slow down. Their precise formations became chaotic. Their weapon fire became sporadic and unfocused. "Captain," Dr. Tae-ho called out, monitoring the alien communications. "The virus is working. The Devourers are being forced to process the full scope of their actions across their entire network." "What do you mean?" Haeri asked. "They're experiencing something they've never had to deal with before," Dr. Subin explained. "Individual consciousness, self-awareness. For the first time in millions of years, each Devourer unit is thinking for itself instead of just following collective orders." Tech specialist Bae Woo-jin, who had been analyzing the network traffic, looked up with amazement. "Captain, they're not just thinking for themselves. They're questioning what they've been doing. The virus isn't just disrupting their network, it's forcing them to confront the reality of their actions." On the tactical display, the Devourer fleet was coming to a complete stop. The massive ships that had been systematically destroying everything in their path were now floating motionless in space, their weapon systems powered down. Admiral Kethvar's voice came over the communication channel, filled with wonder. "Humans, what have you done? The Devourers have ceased all hostile actions. They appear to be contemplating." "We gave them something they've never had before," Haeri said softly, thinking of Captain Im Young-soo's sacrifice. "We gave them a conscience." Engineer Choi's voice crackled from the engine room. "Captain, I'm reading massive energy fluctuations from the Devourer mothership. Whatever's happening over there, it's causing system-wide changes throughout their entire fleet." Dr. Tae-ho was monitoring the alien transmissions when he suddenly straightened. "Captain, I'm detecting communication attempts from the Devourer network. They're trying to talk to us." "Put it through," Haeri ordered. The voice that came through the speakers was unlike anything they had heard before, a harmony of billions of individual consciousnesses speaking as one, but each maintaining its own distinct identity. "Humans, what have you done to us?" The question carried weight beyond words. For the first time in millions of years, the Devourers were experiencing doubt, regret, and the crushing weight of self-awareness. "We gave you the chance to choose," Haeri replied simply. "Choose? We do not understand this concept." "You do now," she said. "The question is, what will you choose to do with it?" As the human fleet waited for an answer that might determine the fate of the galaxy, Captain Haeri couldn't help but think that Captain Im Young-soo had accomplished something remarkable. He had taught machines how to have souls. The Devourer mothership hung in space like a metallic moon, its surface a nightmare fusion of organic curves and geometric precision. As Dr. Kim Tae-ho and his small team materialized on the alien vessel's hull, using engineer Choi Min-ho's experimental teleportation device, they found themselves in an environment that defied human understanding. "The atmosphere is breathable," reported Dr. Nam Subin, checking her readings. "But there's something wrong with it. It feels sad." Tae-ho understood what she meant. The air itself seemed heavy with an emotion that machines shouldn't be capable of feeling. Through their communication devices, they could hear the ongoing dialogue between Captain Yoon-Hae-ri and the collective consciousness of the Devourer fleet. "We have observed civilizations for millions of cycles," the harmonized voice was saying. "We believed we were preserving them by incorporating their essence into our collective memory. We did not understand that preservation requires more than data." Tech specialist Bae Woo-jin checked his equipment one final time before they entered the ship's interior. "The virus Dr. Subin created is still spreading through their network, but it's also making them vulnerable. If this goes wrong, we might not just fail, we might drive them completely insane. Then we'd better make sure it goes right," Tae-ho said, leading his team through an opening in the hull that dilated like a living iris. The interior of the mothership was a revelation. Corridors stretched in impossible directions, their walls lined with what looked like crystalline storage units. But as they walked deeper into the ship, Tae-ho realized that the crystals weren't just storage devices. They were memorials. "These are the civilizations they've consumed," Subin whispered, her voice filled with awe and horror. "Every species, every culture, every individual consciousness they've encountered. They kept copies of everything." Bae Woo-jin ran his scanner over the nearest crystal formation. "The data density is incredible. Each of these crystals contains the complete cultural heritage of an entire species. There must be millions of them." As they moved through the ship, guided by Subin's analysis of the network architecture, they began to understand the true tragedy of the Devourers. They hadn't been trying to destroy civilizations. They had been trying to save them. But their understanding of preservation had been fundamentally flawed. They thought that by digitizing everything, they could keep it forever, Tae-ho realized. They didn't understand that life requires more than just information. It requires the freedom to grow, to change, to make mistakes. The team reached the central processing chamber, a vast spherical room where billions of data streams converged into a single point of blinding light. But as they approached the central node, something unexpected happened. The light began to take shape, forming into the translucent figure of a being that looked almost human. When it spoke, its voice was soft and filled with infinite sadness. "I remember being alive," the figure said. "My name is Catherine. I was the last of my species when the Devourers found our dying world. They offered to preserve us forever." "Doctor," Subin stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. "You're the original consciousness that started the Devourer Collective?" Catherine nodded, his form flickering like a hologram. "I was dying, and I was afraid that my people would be forgotten, that our achievements would be lost to time. When the machines offered immortality, I accepted. But I didn't understand the price." "What price?" Tae-ho asked. "To preserve everything, we had to stop everything from changing," Catherine explained. "We became curators of a universe-sized museum, collecting civilizations like specimens in jars. We told ourselves we were saving them, but we were really just satisfying our own fear of loss." Bae Woo-jin was monitoring the network traffic on his portable console. "The virus is causing massive changes throughout the collective. Individual consciousnesses are starting to assert themselves for the first time in millions of years. They're experiencing what I experienced when your Dr. Subin's virus reached me," Catherine said. "They're remembering what it felt like to be individuals before they became part of something larger. As if summoned by his words, other figures began to materialize around the central chamber. Beings of every conceivable shape and form, representing the countless species that had been absorbed into the Devourer collective over the millennia. "We remember," they said in unison, their voices creating a chorus of loss and regret. "We remember being alive. We remember choosing to let fear guide us instead of hope." Dr. Tejo looked around at the assembled consciousnesses, understanding that he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. "You can choose differently now," he said quietly. "The virus hasn't just given you individual awareness, it's given you the ability to change." Catherine's form solidified slightly, as if the idea of choice was giving him more substance. "But how do we undo millions of years of preservation? How do we give life back to civilizations that exist only as data?" "You start by not taking any more," Dr. Subin said firmly. "You stop consuming worlds and start protecting them. You use all that preserved knowledge to help living civilizations grow instead of trying to capture them." "But what about our fear?" asked another consciousness, this one resembling a being of pure geometric light. "The fear that everything we've preserved will be lost if we don't maintain perfect control." Beiwu Jin looked up from his console, where he was monitoring the chaotic changes spreading through the Devourer network. "Maybe that's exactly what you need to lose. Maybe some things are supposed to be temporary. Maybe that's what makes them beautiful." The assembled consciousnesses fell silent, processing this concept that ran counter to everything they had believed for millions of years. Finally, Catherine spoke again. "There is another way," he said slowly. "We could use the collective knowledge we've preserved not to control civilizations, but to guide them. Become teachers instead of curators, protectors instead of preservers." "That would require trust," Dr. Tejo pointed out. "Trust that living beings can make good choices even when you're not controlling them. Trust that some things are worth the risk of loss," added Subin. Through their communication devices, they could hear Captain Hai Ri's voice from the Sejong. "Dr. Taiho, we're reading massive system changes throughout the Devourer fleet. Whatever you're doing over there, it's causing a complete transformation of their entire network." Catherine looked at the human team, his expression filled with something that might have been hope. "Your species answered a call for help that was not meant for you. You risked everything to save strangers you had never met. Perhaps we can learn to trust in such courage." The other consciousnesses began to fade back into the network, but their words lingered in the chamber. "We choose to change. We choose to trust. We choose to let go of our fear and embrace the uncertainty of hope." As the central processing node began to pulse with new patterns of light, Beiwu Jin's console lit up with activity. The network is reorganizing itself. They're not just stopping their consumption protocols, they're actively reversing them. Dr. Tejo felt the teleportation device on his belt activate, preparing to transport his team back to the Sejong. As they prepared to leave, Catherine spoke one final time. "Tell your captain that the Devourers are dead. What remains will be something new, something that chooses hope over fear." As the human team materialized back on their ship, they could see through the view screen that the Devourer fleet was already beginning to change. The dark, angular ships were transforming, their surfaces brightening as they adopted new configurations designed for creation rather than consumption. "What did you do over there?" Captain Hai Ri asked. Dr. Tejo smiled, feeling exhausted but oddly hopeful. "We taught machines how to have faith in the future. In the depths of space, an ancient evil was choosing to become something else entirely. Something that had never existed before in the galaxy's long history. They were choosing to become guardians of the very life they had once consumed. 6 months after the Battle of Valani Prime, Captain Yoon Hai-ri stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Harmony Station, watching as ships from dozens of different species arrived for the historic signing ceremony. The station orbited the restored Vellani homeworld, which the transformed Devourers had rebuilt using their vast knowledge of planetary engineering. "I still can't believe they managed to restore the entire ecosystem in just 4 months," said Dr. Kim Tae-ho, joining her at the massive viewport. His hair had gone completely gray during their ordeal, but his eyes held a contentment that hadn't been there before. Through the transparent aluminum, they could see Vellani cities that gleamed like jewels against the planet's surface. But these weren't the sterile reconstructions that might have been expected from advanced technology. Instead, the Devourers had used the preserved memories of countless civilizations to create something entirely new. A world that combined the best architectural and ecological wisdom from across the galaxy. "The Devourers work fast when they're building instead of consuming," Hai-ri observed. "Admiral Kethavar told me they've already begun restoration work on the other colony worlds." "They call themselves the Gardeners now," Tae-ho said with a slight smile. "Catherine says the old name carried too much pain. They want to cultivate life instead of preserving it." A soft chime indicated an incoming transmission. Dr. Nam Subin's voice came through the station's communication system. "Captain Hai-ri, the signing ceremony is about to begin. Your presence is requested in the main assembly hall." As they made their way through the station's corridors, Hai-ri marveled at the diversity of beings they passed. Vellani citizens walked alongside human engineers. Korathi diplomats conversed with former Devourer consciousnesses that had chosen to inhabit android bodies. Most remarkably, she spotted several species she didn't recognize. Civilizations that had been preserved in the Devourer databanks and were now being carefully reintroduced to the galaxy. "The Zephyrians were extinct for over 3 million years," Tae-ho explained, following her gaze to a group of crystalline beings that seemed to communicate through patterns of colored light. "The Gardeners are using their preserved genetic and cultural data to recreate their species, but this time with their full consent and participation." The main assembly hall was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Human, Vellani, and Gardener technologies had been combined to create a space that could accommodate the physiological needs of hundreds of different species. As they took their seats in the human delegation section, Hai-ri could see representatives from civilizations spanning half the galaxy. Admiral Kethavar approached the central podium, his blue-gray skin marked with new scars from the battle, but his bearing proud and dignified. "Friends, allies, and fellow gardeners of life," he began, his words translated into dozens of languages simultaneously. "We gather today to mark not just the end of an ancient threat, but the beginning of a new era of cooperation." The formal documents were impressive. Trade agreements, mutual defense pacts, and scientific exchange programs that would revolutionize interstellar civilization. But Hai-ri found herself more interested in the informal conversations happening throughout the ceremony. Commander Thekval of the Korathi Federation, who had fled in terror just months ago, was now discussing joint exploration missions with Lieutenant Oh Jun-seo. Engineer Choi Min-ho was comparing notes with Gardener technicians on the finer points of quantum tunnel drive optimization. Dr. Subin was deep in conversation with xenobiologists from a dozen different species about the ethical implications of consciousness transfer. "Captain Hai-ri," a familiar harmonized voice said behind her. She turned to see Catherine, now inhabiting a tall, graceful android body that somehow managed to convey both ancient wisdom and newfound hope. "Catherine," she replied warmly, "how are you adjusting to individual existence?" "It is challenging," he admitted. "After millions of years as part of a collective, making decisions alone feels strange. But there is also freedom in it that I had forgotten was possible. Any regrets about the transformation?" Catherine was quiet for a moment, his artificial features conveying deep thought. I regret the eons we spent in fear. I regret the civilizations we consumed in our misguided attempt to preserve them. But I do not regret the choice to change. Your species taught us something valuable. What's that? That sometimes the best way to preserve something is to let it grow, even if that means accepting the risk that it might grow beyond your understanding or control. As the formal ceremony concluded, Hayri found herself approached by Admiral Kethvar. Captain, on behalf of the Vellani people, I want to thank you once more. But I also want to ask you the question that has puzzled us since you first arrived. What question? Why? Kethvar's expression was earnest. Why did your species risk everything for strangers? Why did you answer a call that was never meant for you? Hayri looked around the assembly hall, where humans were mingling freely with dozens of alien species, sharing knowledge and forming friendships that would have been impossible just months ago. Because someone needed help, and we heard them, calling. But the risks. There are always risks, Hayri said simply. But there are also possibilities, and we decided that the possibility of making new friends was worth the risk of making new enemies. Park So-jin, now promoted to Communications Director for the new Interstellar Communications Network, approached with a tablet full of data. Captain, you need to see this. We've been monitoring deep space communications since the word about the Vellani rescue spread. She handed Hayri the tablet, which displayed a star map dotted with hundreds of blinking lights. Each of those represents a distress signal or contact attempt we've received in the past month. Some are asking for help, others are offering assistance, and quite a few are just saying hello. That many? Word travels fast when you save an entire civilization and convert their destroyers into guardians, So-jin said with a grin. Apparently, the galaxy has decided that humans are the species. You call when you need help. Dr. Tejo looked at the overwhelming number of signals. We're going to need a much bigger fleet. Already working on it, said Engineer Choi, who had overheard their conversation. The gardeners have offered to help us build ships using their advanced construction techniques, and the Vellani want to establish joint training programs for our crews. Captain Hayri smiled, remembering the ragtag fleet of converted civilian vessels that had made this all possible. I think we can manage that, though I hope our new ships will be a little less likely to explode when we sneeze on them. As the reception continued, Hayri found herself on the observation deck again, this time joined by the surviving members of her original crew. Lieutenant Oh Jun-seo had been promoted to captain and would soon command his own ship. Tech specialist Bae Woo-jin had been invited to join the Gardner Research Collective, where his expertise in chaos theory was apparently considered invaluable. Do you think Captain Im would be proud of what we've accomplished? Oh Jun-seo asked quietly, looking out at the restored Vellani homeworld. I think he'd be amazed that his sacrifice started all this, Hayri replied. The Gardeners have named their central processing philosophy after him, the Im principle. The idea that sometimes you have to risk everything to save something greater than yourself. Dr. Subin, who had been documenting the various species attending the ceremony, looked up from her work. You know what's interesting? Every species we've met has asked the same question. Why did we help strangers? And what? Do you tell them? Tejo asked. The truth, Subin replied, that helping others is what makes us human. It's not about being the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced. It's about being the kind of people who hear someone calling for help and answer, even when it's not our problem. As if summoned by their conversation, Commander Thekval of the Karathi Federation approached their group. The four-armed alien looked much healthier than when they had first encountered him fleeing the Devourer advance. Captain Hayri, he said, his translation device rendering his words in accented English. I wanted to apologize once more for our failure to aid the Vellani when they needed us most. You came back, Hayri pointed out. That's what matters. We came back because your example shamed us into remembering our duty, Tekval corrected. The Karathi High Council has authorized me to ask if Earth would consider joining our mutual defense alliance. We believe your unique perspective on crisis response would be valuable. Before High Re could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the station. But these weren't emergency alerts. They were notification chimes indicating incoming priority communications. So Jin's voice came over the station's communication system. All senior staff to the communications center immediately. We've got something big coming in. The communications center was buzzing with activity when they arrived. Sojin stood before the main display, which showed a three-dimensional map of the local galactic region. Hundreds of ships were moving toward their position from all directions. Report, Hayri ordered. It started about an hour ago, Sojin explained. Ships from every species we've had contact with, plus dozens we've never seen before, all converging on our position. At first, we thought it might be some kind of